Hi and welcome to Storytime. I'm Kimberlyn here at Life's Work Yoga, and I gotta say it's been a bit of a crazy morning. I think things have settled down now, but on my walk to the studio this morning, there was probably, I'm not exaggerating here, probably 50 emergency vehicles that sped past me with full sirens and full lights, some going west, some going north, some going east. It was a little bit chaotic to the point where I actually convinced myself that this was a practice, this was a drill for the collaborating organizations of emergency services. Upon arrival at the studio, I learned from my neighbor that we had an active shooter here in Frederick. Now, since then, things apparently have been resolved, that the shooter was captured, but there are 2 pending victims from what I understand. Now, all of that said, kind of watching it unfold from the safety of my studio and knowing that my family was safe at home, my immediate circle was at ease. But my concern for everything else, for the social unrest that is causing these kinds of actions, these doings, these behaviors that are desperate for attention or desperate for healing, it really brings me back to the thing that I know most, which is yoga. Yoga is a practice of bringing alignment, of cultivating union. And when we harm one another, whether it's with words or our actions, or whether it's with weapons of guns, when we do harm, we are directly competing and denying our own inherent union, the oneness. So I intended to talk about spring today. I intended to talk about this shift and how our blooming process is really a process of becoming. And so it's not that I want to let go of that intention, but I want to show you, if I can, how this relates to the blooming, the reopening that is post-pandemic shutdown from the extremes. Now, the truth is I'm reading that we're on perhaps another rise, a 4th wave of infections. And yet, the vaccine has arrived. And in Maryland, at least, that vaccine will be available for everyone as soon as tomorrow from our mass vaccination sites, and as soon as Monday for all of the local distributions, the pharmacies and the care centers. And that brings me a great sense of hope. Now, we talked about hope in March, and that doesn't mean we're done with the conversation of hope. It's really about how do we live in that space of hope? How do we cultivate that confidence that hope will prevail when there are so many things that are scary and overwhelming and just bad, just heart-wrenchingly incongruous with union, with life itself? Well, again, I come back to what I know, the practice of yoga. The practice is the fertile soil that we plant our roots, that we cultivate, and we grow into our best selves. Now, this doesn't mean that we become something that we're not already. It means that we already have the seeds of this beautiful being that is part of the oneness within us. But having the capacity to access, to open to that beauty, requires the choice of living in hope, of living in alignment from our body, our breath, and our mind. So just as I show up here on my mat to practice, to guide perhaps you in a practice of asana or pranayama, breathing, or meditation, it's really about cultivating this union that we can know ourselves better so that we can show ourselves more authentically. We can show up with access to compassion, with an openness to truth, so that even when life is not as we want it to be, We can be with what is. This is the practice of yoga. And when things are not how we want them to be, perhaps the practice of yoga is about reestablishing that intention. This is the practice of the metta, M-E-T-T-A, meditation. So I led a small variation of this in my morning practice, and I thought I'd lead that here just a moment as well. Now, metta is about sending out our loving compassion, sending out our intention of union and wellness, of well-being to those who may not have access. It could be directed to someone whom we love and needs our additional love. Maybe they're having a rough go, right? Or maybe it's someone that we don't even know specifics about what it is that they're suffering with. The metta doesn't require us to know. That's why we practice compassion and we don't practice knowing or being an expert, being a master, or having all the answers. We live in the inquiry. So maybe you can find a moment just to be paused in this quiet and send out a loving message to those who might be hurting, those who might be feeling disconnected, overwhelmed, hopeless in their living, in their current circumstances. May all beings know peace. May all beings know safety. May all beings know love. May all beings know connection. If spring is the reopening phase of the seasons, and we mark these seasons to help us cultivate this passage of time, it gives us permission to create what I call milestone moments. Moments of really being acutely aware of what is, so that we can then use that awareness to direct our actions, our doings, our non-doings, our undoings and our redoings. So that as the invitation presents itself, as we become aware of perhaps a need that may not be within our direct control, how can we apply our attention, the greatest gift we have, to give our attention to a need in service, seva, to do not because of what's coming back to us, but because the act of doing, the act of service, is part of our contribution of being part of the whole. And what I want to remember for myself, which was a hard lesson to even embrace for me, is this idea that becoming, of blooming, is not about denying who I was or even having to become someone new. It's about remembering who I already am. The seeds that have already been planted genetically, socially, culturally, spiritually into my center, the Atman. And yes, there are layers of protection, both philosophical and metaphoric, that I have layered on or I have built around that true center. But peeling back the layers is part of the practice of yoga. It's cultivating the soil that holds the seed that is our true center, our Atman, the beautiful. And remembering that beautiful seed is already there just might be enough to help us open and bloom, to become the purest, the most beautiful, fullest bloom of who we already are. One, together in this, through the process, both highs and lows. So, whatever is on your plate today, I hope that you know safety, that you know love, that you know connection and belonging. May you breathe deeply, move freely. May you labor lovingly and live vibrantly. May you trust this process, this centered seed, your Atman, to bloom forth through the practice of showing up and cultivating a relationship with authenticity and with each other so that we can live in true connection, in true yoga. Namaste. Please reach out if I can be of support for you in this practice of living yoga and blooming into your best and fullest, truest self. Take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.